Hello and welcome. You're watching the World Report on NDTV World. There is a lot lined up on the show from around the globe, starting with politics. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has arrived in Saudi Arabia ahead of crucial talks with Russian officials to end the nearly three-year war in Ukraine. This follows President Donald Trump's phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin, where he ordered top officials to begin negotiations. Riyadh, which has played a key role in early discussions, also helped broker a recent prisoner swap. Rubio, along with National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and White House Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, will meet Russian officials, though Moscow's delegation has not yet been confirmed. And top foreign policy aides in the Trump administration plan to meet with Russian officials in Saudi Arabia this week to discuss a path to ending the war in Ukraine, the first substantial talks between the superpowers on the conflict. The meeting would come less than a week after President Trump spoke on the phone with President Vladimir Putin of Russia. Trump told reporters afterward that talks on ending Russia's war in Ukraine would take place in Saudi Arabia. The meeting will most likely draw criticism from some top Ukrainian officials. President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, he said on Thursday that his country must be involved in any talks over its own fate, a statement he made after learning about the Trump-Putin call. Ukrainian officials fear that Mr. Trump could try to reach a deal with the Russians that would not have strong security guarantees or viable terms for an enduring peace for Ukraine. Now, some reports suggest that Kiev has not been invited to talks between the US and Russia aimed at ending the war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky and First Lady Olena Zelenska have arrived in Abu Dhabi for an official visit. They were welcomed by UAE Minister of State for International Cooperation, Reem Al-Hashimi. The key agenda would be securing the release of more Ukrainians held in Russian captivity. The UAE has played a vital role in mediating prisoner exchanges between Kiev and Moscow. This visit comes amid ongoing efforts to bring detained Ukrainians home. French President Emmanuel Macron is set to host an emergency summit on Monday with key European leaders to discuss the Ukraine war. This comes after US officials suggested Europe may be left out of any talks on ending the conflict. Attendees include UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, NATO General Secretary Mark Rutte, and EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Washington's recent moves, including a call between President Trump and Vladimir Putin, have raised concerns among the European allies. The meeting aims to shape Europe's response to the evolving US stance on Ukraine.
Le président de la République réunira les principaux pays européens
demain
pour
demain,
une
sûr.
discussion
Vous confirmez?
pour des discussions portant sur la sécurité européenne. Mais ce sont des discussions qui n'ont pas attendu, si je puis dire, ni ce week-end, ni les déclarations des uns et des autres, puisque je vous dis que mercredi dernier encore, les Européens étaient à Paris.
Mais là, je comprends pas. C'est une réunion très...
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said he's ready and willing to put UK troops on the ground in Ukraine to help guarantee its security as part of a peace deal. Writing in the Daily Telegraph, Starmer said securing a lasting peace in Ukraine was, as he put it, essential if we are to deter Putin from further aggression in the future. Before attending an emergency summit with European leaders in Paris on Monday, Keir Starmer said that the UK was prepared to contribute to the security guarantees to Ukraine by putting our own troops on the ground if necessary. And former Mauritius Prime Minister Pravind Jugnauth has been granted bail after his arrest on money laundering charges. Authorities seized 114 million Mauritius rupees, about $2.5 million, during raids at his home and other locations. A magistrate in Port Louis barred Jugnauth from contacting witnesses and ordered him to appear in court to complete the bail process. Jugnauth denies the allegations, and his lawyer insists he will fight these charges. The case comes after Mauritius's new government launched financial audits, raising concerns about corruption under the previous administration. Last month, the country's former central bank governor was also arrested in a fraud case. Mauritius, remember, a key offshore financial hub, is now facing scrutiny over its financial transparency. And in other news, strong tremors were felt in Delhi and its adjoining areas at about 5:36 a.m. local time after a 4.0 magnitude earthquake struck the national capital. The quake's depth was just 5 kilometers. Delhi NCR earthquake was measured 4 on the Richter scale. And families of Israeli hostages held in Gaza marked 500 days since their loved ones were taken captive, with nationwide protests and a symbolic 500-minute fast. In Jerusalem, protesters also thanked US President Donald Trump for brokering the recent hostage-prisoner exchange, but stressed that the work is far from being done. Talks on the second phase of negotiations, which could secure more releases, have yet to begin, raising fears that Israel's military may resume operations after the current ceasefire phase ends in 2 weeks. Take a listen.
It's been 500 days that the hostages that are still alive have been suffering tremendously. We see how they're coming out. We hear about the tortures they've gone through. We've heard about the starvation. We know that we cannot let this happen. And I want to extend my gratitude to President Trump for stepping up, for showing leadership, and for bringing forth this agreement that finally has enabled us to see some of our brothers and sisters coming out of this torment. However, the work is far from being done.
Israel's Prime Minister has said he's working to make US President Donald Trump's plan to remove and resettle Gaza's population a reality. Benjamin Netanyahu said that he was cooperating with the US on a common strategy for the Palestinian territory after a meeting with the United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Jerusalem on Sunday. The talks come after US President Donald Trump proposed a US takeover of Gaza and removal of the 2 million Palestinians there to neighboring countries.
The Secretary and I also discussed how the many international institutions have been hijacked and turned into anti-American and anti-Israeli forums. We see that in the UN General Assembly, in the UN Human Rights Commission, where anti-Americanism is rampant, and more resolutions are passed about Israel than the rest of the world combined. And we see it especially in the lawfare that is being waged against America and Israel at the ICC, the ICJ, and elsewhere. The ICC has outrageously libeled Israel and issued arrest warrants based on utter lies. Like America, Israel is not subject to the jurisdiction of the ICC and does not accept the court's authority. Israel commends President Trump and his administration for restoring his executive order against the ICC and for moving quickly to sanction ICC officials.
Israel has received a shipment of heavy Mk-84 bombs from the United States, and President Donald Trump lifted a Biden-era block on their export. Trump defended his decision, saying he believes in peace through strength and that the weapons had already been contracted for. The Biden administration had previously halted the shipment over concerns about civilian casualties in Gaza. The Mk-84 is a 2,000-pound bomb that is capable of penetrating thick concrete and metal, causing extensive destruction. The decision marks a shift in U.S. policy, reinforcing Washington's military support for Israel. The widow of late Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny has accused President Vladimir Putin of seeking to conceal the truth about his death in an Arctic penal colony. Navalny's widow, Yulia Navalnaya, accused Putin of trying to cover up the true causes of his death and of erasing the memory of her late husband in a video released on the anniversary of his death. Authorities blamed Navalny's death, announced February 16th in 2024, on natural causes, a sudden spike in blood pressure and chronic diseases. His family and allies reject that and insist he was killed on orders from the Kremlin, accusations its officials deny. Tens of thousands of people attended his funeral in Moscow on the 1st of March in a rare show of defiance in a country where any street rally or even single pickets often result in immediate arrest.
Сейчас, спустя год после его смерти, он пытается стереть имя Алексея из нашей памяти, скрыть правду об убийстве, заставить нас смириться. Но у него это не получится. Боль, которую мы чувствуем, делает нас сильнее. И этот год показал, что мы крепче, чем сами о себе думали.
M23 rebels, allegedly backed by Rwanda, they have advanced into the strategic city of Bukavu in eastern Congo, meeting little resistance from government troops. Rebel commander Bernard Bayamungo, he claims that the group has controlled the city since midday on Sunday. Bukavu's capture follows M23's seizure of Goma in January, further eroding Kinshasa's authority in the east. The Congolese government accuses Rwanda of sending troops into Bukavu, calling it an occupation attempt. Rwanda denies these allegations, saying it is defending itself against a Hutu militia operating alongside the Congolese forces. The rapid escalation has raised fears of a broader regional conflict. The Trump administration has escalated its legal battle by turning to the United States Supreme Court to challenge a federal judge ruling that temporarily blocked President Trump's attempt to remove Hampton Dellinger, head of the Office of Special Counsel. This move could signal a significant legal test as the administration seeks to assert executive control over independent agencies. The Justice Department's filing argues that the judge's order is an unprecedented attack on the separation of powers as it restricts the president's authority to manage the federal government. This entire case has the potential to shape future efforts by the Trump administration to reshape the federal bureaucracy, especially as the conservative-leaning Supreme Court has shown an inclination to back executive authority in previous rulings. And at least 9 people have died in the most recent round of harsh weather to pummel the United States, including 8 people in Kentucky who died as creeks swelled from heavy rain and water-covered roads. In Alabama, the Weather Service in Birmingham said it had confirmed an EF1 tornado touchdown overnight in Hale County. Storms there and elsewhere in the state destroyed or damaged a handful of mobile homes, downed trees and toppled power lines, but no injuries were immediately reported. In Atlanta, a person was killed when a large tree fell on the home early on Sunday. Listen in to the mayor of Hazard.
We had warning on this flood, unlike 2022, which is a flash flood, but I think everybody missed the mark because it's supposed to crest at 26 feet and it gets 30 and a half feet. That's the largest flood we've had since 1984. And it was, where the 2022 flood was just in one area, this encompasses the entire county. Not only was it 64 degrees last night, we're getting ready to expect 3 to 7 inches of snow. It could be at any time.
Tibet's capital, Lhasa, welcomed its first snowfall in 2025 on Sunday. Local residents and tourists ventured outdoors to enjoy the breathtaking winter scenery of the iconic landmarks such as the Potala Palace and the Jokhang Temple. Time for a very short break. More news and updates on the other side. Welcome back. On to some business news. The Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has criticized the U.S. decision to block Nippon Steel's acquisition of U.S. Steel, calling it unjust political interference. This move was initially halted by a U.S. government review board and then President Joe Biden. Ishiba's remarks come amid growing trade tensions between Tokyo and Washington, as Japan pushes for greater economic cooperation while protecting its global business interests. Japan's central bank may raise interest rates sooner than and higher than expected, with markets now pricing in a possible hike in July rather than later in the year. Bond yields have surged as investors anticipate the Bank of Japan could push rates beyond 1% and sharp shift for an economy long used to ultra-low borrowing costs. Analysts say that persistent inflation and U.S. scrutiny over currency policies could also influence the BOJ's moves. A key speech by board member Takata this week may offer further policy clues. And oil prices declined for the fourth consecutive day, with Brent crude down to $74.59 a barrel. Investors are betting that potential peace talks between Russia and Ukraine could ease sanctions and increase oil supply. Meanwhile, global trade tensions and the possibility of new tariffs are raising concerns about economic growth and energy demand. US President Donald Trump says he may meet Russian President Vladimir Putin very soon to discuss ending the war. Both Brent and WTI crude have dropped over 3% in the past 4 sessions. Asian stock markets edged higher on Monday, with Hong Kong's tech sector leading gains. Japan's economy grew faster than expected, boosting the yen, while weak US retail sales dragged down the dollar. Investors are also closely watching Russia-Ukraine talks in Saudi Arabia, though details remain unclear. Meanwhile, concerns over US tariffs on EU imports persist. Reuters reports that European Commission may impose stricter food import limits to protect local farmers, echoing President Donald Trump's trade policies. And billionaire Elon Musk has said that his XAI's artificial intelligence chatbot and ChatGPT challenger Grok 3 would be released with a live demo at 8 p.m. Pacific time on Monday. Earlier this week, Musk said that Grok 3 was in the final stages of development and would be released in about a week or two. South Korea has suspended new downloads of the Chinese AI app DeepSeek after the company failed to meet the country's data protection rules. The Personal Information Protection Commission says that the app can resume once it complies with privacy laws. Existing users can still access the service, but new downloads have been blocked since Saturday. The move follows similar action in Italy, where regulators also raised concerns about DeepSeek's handling of personal data. The Chinese startup has appointed legal representatives in South Korea to address this issue. And according to reports, Apple is all set to introduce artificial intelligence features in its Vision Pro headset as early as April. The update will reportedly bring Apple Intelligence, a new guest user mode, and a spatial content app to the $3,499 device. The move comes as Apple accelerates its AI push to stay ahead of competitors. A beta version of developers could launch this week, but Apple is yet to confirm the details.